Coming up, launches and aborts.
ExoMars is on the pad.
Blue Origin factory revealed.
And we're going to explain what a gigabert is. Stay tuned. Tomorrow begins right now. And welcome to Tomorrow for Saturday, March 12th, 2015. This is episode 9.09, hashtag Cosmopolitics. My name is Benjamin Higginbotham. With me is Jared, and we'll have Mike and Carrie Ann in just a moment. But before we get into them, I'd like to give a huge shout out to all of the patrons of Tomorrow who have helped to make this specific segment of this episode happen. These are the people who have contributed $10 or more to this specific episode. Find out how you can help crowdfund the shows of tomorrow. Head on over to patreon.com/TMRO. All right, we had some exciting launch coverage happen this last week, and hi, Mike. We're joined by Mike, and then we've got for Capcom, we've also got Carrie Ann sitting right over there. She'll be taking care of all of our social media and making sure that all the questions get filtered back to us and kind of running the whole back end of the show, as it were. All right, let's go ahead and get started with some launch coverage. First up, we have an Ariane 5.
Top. Allumage du Vulcain. Allumage des EAP, décollage.
And whoosh off the pad it goes. That happened on March 8th at 5:20 Coordinated Universal Time. This is the Eutelsat 65 West 8, which is designed for a 15-year life. It's a multi-band telecommunications satellite. The power of Ariane 5 is messing with that camera.
Yeah, maybe they need that ComSat in order to clear it up.
They really do. They really do. Now, what's interesting is that this was a solo mission. Actually, it was the second straight solo mission on top of an Ariane 5. What that means is that there was no secondary payload sitting next to the primary satellite of Eutelsat 65 West A. It was only this one satellite. This satellite's actually, like I said, this has happened 2 times in a row, mostly because they really wanted to get the satellite up right away. They didn't want to have to wait for a secondary payload to be ready to go on the vehicle, so they just paid an extra, like, look, we'll buy the second slot, here we go. The reason they did that is because they have 24 Ku band transponders, and that's basically for direct-to-home television service over Brazil, which they want during the Rio Olympics this summer. So kind of an important satellite that they didn't want to wait on. Also, they've got 16 of the 24 Ka bands. They're actually spot bands. Those are going to Hughes Network Services, and they're going to be used for 24 gigabits worth of, I don't know what a gigabit is, but they got 24 of them per second of throughput capability for internet directly to the home, which is pretty cool. I think we're seeing more and more kind of satellite internet to the home type services. So there you go. Like I said, that happened March 8th on an Ariane 5.
Man, I can't wait for gigabit internet. It's going to be sweet.
You think gigabit internet is fast. Just wait till you see gigabit internet. All right. Next up on Thursday, March 10th at 10:31 Coordinated Universal Time, the Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle. And whoosh with solids, so it just goes right off the pad.
See you later.
I feel like a sports announcer when I said that. Right off the pad. Oh my goodness.
Look at the speed.
This is essentially a GPS satellite. It's a positioning satellite. It is the 6th spacecraft in the Indian Regional Navigation Satellite System, or IRNSS. And this one's designated 1F, so IRNSS 1F, and it's going to be sitting over Africa in a geostationary orbit. There are 5 other IRNSS platforms that have been launched by India since 2013, which is why this is the 6th. However, a 7th IRNSS satellite is due for liftoff in April, which is going to finish out their network. Now, this is not a worldwide network like the Russian network or the United States network. This is actually one of many smaller networks. Actually, Japan, China, and Europe have smaller networks, with, again, only the Russia and US having basically full worldwide coverage networks. And this is going to have positioning data for India with an accuracy of about 20 meters, and for those of you in the United States, or if you prefer imperial units for whatever reason, that's about 66 feet. And it, like I said, will work over India and neighboring regions. And this next story happened at the last minute, which is kind of why we were kind of scrambling.
Yep.
This is something that doesn't happen very often. Here, we're going to show you, this happened today, March 12th, 2016 at 18:56 Coordinating Universal Time, right before the show went live. This is a Soyuz 21B. Check it out. Engine ignition.
Uh-oh.
Huh. So normally we'd be like, all right, launch abort, not really newsworthy, except that that was a Soyuz rocket. They don't generally have launch aborts. This was kind of startling to see. I guess I don't think
Especially the black smoke there.
Yeah, you can see it kind of, you've got a little bit of liquid oxygen turned into gaseous oxygen in the lower right, but then you see this big black cloud kind of go with it. It's probably due to some of the RP-1 combustion event that clearly started for just a second. There was an automated engine cutoff that was issued right at system ignition. Now, it was supposed to launch today. They have a backup window exactly 24 hours from its initial launch window of 18:56 Coordinating Universal Time. However, it's kind of questionable as to whether they'll be able to actually utilize that or not if we wait long enough. So you saw it abort, and then Roscosmos was like, no.
Yeah, we're done.
We're done now. You don't get to watch anymore. And that's it. There you go. That was the whole freaking thing. This is the Resource P3 satellite, which is a multispectral observation satellite of our planet. Observation satellite of our planet. So there you go.
Excellent.
Weird seeing a launch abort from a Soyuz. You don't.
This is the first time I've ever seen a launch abort
I've
from
never
a Soyuz.
seen one. Mike, have you seen a launch abort on a Soyuz?
I've never seen a launch abort. I don't even know if there've been regular launch aborts like this that still had a healthy rocket. The last thing that I can think of where they had an abort scenario where the rocket actually did explode, but they were actually able to safely recover, was Soyuz T-10-1, and that was back in 1983. That had a crew on board, and it was one of the times that they actually used the launch abort system and successfully were able to pull away from the rocket and save the crew. But that's the last time that I remember anything that was on the pad with the Soyuz. There have been other, kind of minor accidents and almost problems in other stages of flight, but that's the last thing I can think of on the pad where there was something like that.
Interesting.
Well, according to Helpdesk, sources say it was caused by missing signal in the ignition process. The next launch attempt will indeed be in 24 hours. We didn't have enough time to get that into our launch calendar, so keep in mind, kind of watch for this. Watch our Twitter account. Actually, next launch on Twitter is a great place to watch. They'll have that all updated. And, of course, launchlibrary.net will have real-time updates. They've been following this since it happened, like in real time, and they were setting it to red and like doing information gathering.
Yeah.
So
Good stuff.
there you go. All right, let's head it on over to Jared to talk about ExoMars.
Yeah, speaking of rockets in Russia, ExoMars Trace Gas Orbiter is getting ready to actually launch to Mars on Monday.
Ready for some B-roll?
Let's look at this
It's
beautiful
almost like we're
B-roll.
a real station. Here we go,
Yeah,
B-roll.
look at that. There is the gigantic Russian Proton launch vehicle that has been successfully rolled out to its pad. And its payload, as we just said, is the European Space Agency's ExoMars Trace Gas Orbiter. And Space Mike, you know how to say this. The lander's name is?
Schiaparelli.
Yes, very, very good. So, it is set to launch at 9:32 and 42 seconds Coordinated Universal Time on March 14th, this Monday. It will fire through the first 3 stages in 10 minutes, and then it will spend the next 10 hours firing the 4th stage to get ExoMars on the proper trajectory to Mars. Now, assuming a successful launch, the transit time will be 7 months, with arrival planned for October 19th. ExoMars Trace Gas Orbiter will be there to take a look at the atmosphere and see trace gases like methane, potentially find their source. And Space Mike, the name of the lander?
Schiaparelli.
Will be landing sort of litho-braking to the surface, if you will, and it will act as a weather station on the surface of Mars for about 7 days maximum. It's only battery-powered, no solar panels or a nuclear battery on board with it there. Of course, everyone is going to be very carefully watching this because we all remember how Phobos Grunt went back in 2011, where it launched, and then it sort of stayed in Earth orbit and then eventually came back home. Yeah, we're all kind of, don't want to say nervously anticipating this launch, but it's definitely going to be very closely watched with it.
So, real quick, what is the difference between aerobraking and lithobraking?
So aerobraking is when you use the atmosphere to slow yourself down, and lithobraking is when you use the surface of wherever you're going to slow yourself down. So ExoMars Trace Gas Orbiter will actually do aerobraking. So it
Like
will,
this?
yeah, it will use its solar panels as it goes through the upper area of Mars's atmosphere. It will use that very thin atmosphere at that high speed that it's traveling in order to slow itself down. That way you don't have to use as much fuel when you go into orbit around Mars. So you bleed off the energy through the atmosphere and interaction with it on your actual spacecraft.
Can they steer with that too, or not really? Is it too thin / they don't really have the...
I believe it's too thin, unfortunately, to allow you to do that. Also, I don't know if you want to make steerable portions on your on your probe that you've got there, because you want to keep it as safe as possible during that.
Yeah, but you also want it to land about where you want it to land, right?
Yeah, well, actually, the lander, Mike,
The Schiaparelli.
is going to be released 3 days beforehand, and it is going to use essentially a heat shield to land, and then 2 supersonic parachutes, and then after that, it does have braking rockets, but it's not like a Curiosity where they sky craned it in, or like the Phoenix Mars lander where the rockets actually took you all the way down to the surface. It actually has a crushable carbon fiber structure at the bottom of the lander. So it's going to hit at like 40 to 50 kilometers an hour.
It's got a crumple zone.
It literally has a crumple zone built into it, and they're going to see if this is actually a viable way that you can land something on Mars. And
Always something new.
Yeah. On top
NASA. All right. So NASA went from, you know what? Let's have a crane system that drops it down with a bunch of firing things, and then hope that we don't land that. You know. And then they were like, we can do better. How about we crash into the planet and see if we can survive that? But hey, man, it's been working, so I can't really fault them.
Yeah, whatever works. I guess
yeah.
it's just first it has to launch, and that's the hard part.
I just wish they had some inflatable balloons just in case.
So Elon Dusk Till Dawn says, you're coming in and you're using the solar panels to aerobrake, you said, right?
Yeah.
Wouldn't that damage the solar panels?
No, because you can rotate your solar panels so that the portion with the solar cells on it is not facing forward. And also the amount of force that's being put on the actual probe itself isn't actually going to be breaking anything as long as you've done your math correctly and it comes in at the correct angle and everything with it.
Oh,
so
they did bring. I said NASA. This is ESA.
Yeah.
So that was my bad. You're right. We bounced between Curiosity landing and whatnot. So this is the European Space Agency, not NASA.
Different techniques.
Although, has anyone landed anything successfully on the surface of Mars that isn't NASA?
Okay, so there was a very good point made in the comments during a previous show where I said that no one had successfully landed on Mars besides NASA, and I was wrong, this is right, which is that back in the 70s, the Russians did land a probe called Mars 3 on the surface of Mars, and it worked for 12 seconds.
Well, that was successful for technically speaking.
Technically speaking, it was successful for 12 seconds. Great job.
All right. Moving along, talk to me about Exploration Mission 2, Space Mike, and what the heck is that, and why are we talking about it?
So the reason that we're talking about this, Exploration Mission 2 is the planned launch of an Orion capsule with a crew of astronauts on board, and that would be sent to lunar orbit. And with this, it kind of follows a similar plan of Exploration Mission 1. Exploration Mission 1 has the same flight trajectory where it would enter into lunar orbit for a couple of days before coming back home. But the big reason why we're talking about this is they plan to use something called the interim cryogenic propulsion stage to be the upper stage for the Orion launching on top of the space launch capsule. And here is a version, actually, of the upgraded version, which is not using the interim cryogenic propulsion stage, but the exploration upper stage. And the reason we're talking about this is for that one mission, for Exploration Mission 2, they were planning on using what's acronymed as ICPS. And with that, the interim cryogenic propulsion stage, they would have to human rate that stage. And instead of spending the millions of dollars to human rate it for just one launch, they want to move forward to the exploration upper stage. However, with the NASA Astronaut Office, they have a requirement that no major propulsion element being used for the first time will fly on a crewed flight. So they need to test out the exploration upper stage seen here before launching that Exploration Mission 2, which they've now decided to use the exploration upper stage on. So the Exploration Mission 2, with the crew of astronauts going into lunar orbit, has been pushed back to year 2023. And instead, they're thinking of launching the SLS with a mission in between Exploration Mission 1 and Exploration Mission 2, which would be the congressionally mandated Europa lander. And we actually have an artist rendering of that mission here. And with this, with the congressionally mandated mission, it has to have a lander on board, so it needs a bigger rocket in order to carry it to Europa. And with this, it would be able to test out the exploration upper stage, because it needs that stage in order to get there faster and to be able to deliver not only the orbiter but the lander as well. So by testing it out first, they would be able to essentially fulfill those different requirements of testing out that major propulsion element first before going over to the first crewed flight on Orion. And they've also changed something else with this mission. The plan was to go into lunar orbit just like Exploration Mission 1, but as I mistakenly said last time, there actually is a plan now of looking at options to have it be a lunar flyby mission in an Apollo 8 style. And the reason they might want to do that is to have more options to be able to abort the mission if they need to, and be able to return the crew safely if needed. So Exploration Mission 2 is definitely in flux, as well as all of the other missions that might take place after that. But we might see the Europa Clipper mission launch sooner. The plan is right now to have it launch no later than 2022. So that's some cool updates from that, and I'm excited and looking forward to see what the final version of the future missions for the Space Launch System will be. So anyway, throwing it back to you guys.
Hi. Oh, you're throwing it back to me. Since we did all this communication off air.
There was this amazing, you guys couldn't see it, but Mike is talking. Hopefully it wasn't distracting at Mike, but we're all doing it. Now you can't see it. We're all doing like
you're gonna okay.
There was a great comment from Chris Radcliffe. Capcom, what was that?
Chris Radcliffe in the chat room added, "Are we drinking every time someone says congressionally mandated too? Hashtag cosmopolitics." And as far as I'm concerned, absolutely. Here you go. Drink to that.
Everybody.
All right.
Alcohol.
That's good. Yeah, maybe we should be drinking during the show and not just afterwards.
Dumb question, Space Mike. If we've got a mission in between EM1, Exploration Mission 1, and Exploration Mission 2, do we give it like an Exploration Mission 1.5? Or because it's not really one of those types of missions, it was the Clipper mission?
I don't know.
Yeah.
And I think that the whole exploration mission designation applies only to Space Launch System missions that have the Orion on board. So that's why it might not be an exploration mission and be something else instead.
You were really excited that it became law.
Yes.
I mean, why? Why do you care?
Because if you launch it on if you launch Europa Clipper on an Atlas V in its most powerful configuration, the 551, which is what the baseline for the Europa Clipper mission was, it's a 6-year cruise with gravitational assists on its way to Jupiter. If you use SLS, the Space Launch System, it then becomes a 22-month direct ascent to Jupiter. That means you just shoot the rocket, and it's less than 2 years to get there. And because of the power that Space Launch System has, you also get that extra margin so that you can build the lander to land on Europa and finally do what we've always wanted to do, which is surface science on Europa.
That would be pretty awesome.
So
One other really cool
exciting.
thing about this. One other really cool thing about this is they're going to hold a commercial competition for all of the science instruments for it as well. That's part of the law as well. So I think that's kind of cool to have like a little mini COTS thing for all the science experiments.
Yep.
Yeah. So
Sweet.
You're excited. We were mentioning it's law now, right?
It is law.
Is it actually law? It has to. Europa Clipper must launch on a Space Launch System. That is United States law.
That's congressionally mandated. So, sorry.
Shoot.
There we go. Yeah, but Carrie Ann did it too. All right.
Sorry.
Moving back to you. Let's talk about. Wait, hang on. I'll emulate it here. It's kind of like this. It's like an eclipse. That didn't work very well. All right. Talk to us about that.
What a segue.
A total terrible segue.
Excellent.
It was fantastic. I don't know what you're talking about.
So we just had a total solar eclipse this last week.
Why didn't I see it?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that is the only time that type of wipe is actually useful. Oh my God, you just won the internet. All right.
That is very, very cool. Thank you, Dada, for that. Now, this eclipse crossed Indonesia, Malaysia, and it covered large parts of Eastern Asia and the Pacific Ocean. If you were at the point where you could see the maximum amount of totality, which is totality is what we call the point when the moon is completely covering the sun, like you see right there. Maximum was 4 minutes and 10 seconds of coverage. Interesting thing about this eclipse, it actually started on March 9th, and it continued east until it crossed the international date line and ended on March 8th.
That's so awesome.
So, yeah, figure that one out.
So the eclipse went back in time?
Yes!
Apparently, it's a time-traveling eclipse. Now, that's a GIF that was made through NASA's Discover spacecraft. And
I like
its
this.
epic
I think
camera.
this one's cooler.
This one is from the Japan Meteorological Agency.
Look at that.
Himawari 8, which
Yeah.
takes ultra-high-resolution images of the western Pacific there from geostationary orbit, and this is its view of what it was able to see. So very, very beautiful. Shows you the shadow of the moon, because a solar eclipse is caused by the moon getting between the Earth and the sun and casting its shadow down onto the Earth. And if you're in space, that's what it looks like. So some very, very cool stuff. Now, the next eclipse is going to be on September 1st, 2016 of this year. That path of totality will cross Central Africa, Madagascar, and the southern Indian Ocean. So if you want to see it, you should probably have your travel plans already set right now. And also, just a reminder, if you're here in the United States, on August 21st, 2017, there will be a total solar eclipse that will be visible here. The path is going to take it from the Pacific Northwest through the Midwest of the United States and out through South Carolina. So you will have the chance to see several minutes of totality, and I am already planning my trip to go see that.
So get your binoculars out.
Just
No,
stare
don't
at
do
the
that.
sun.
Don't do that.
That's why they call me Whiskers.
It's a terrible idea.
Yeah, don't do that.
do that.
Don't
For
do that.
real, don't do that.
Don't.
All right. No. Bad
Stop.
internet. Stop. All right, let's go back over to Space Mike. There was some pretty cool stuff that Blue Origin was showing off. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so for the first time, Blue Origin invited, I believe it was 11 journalists into their factory in Kent, Washington, and holy cow, there was some amazing stuff that they showed there, and some amazing stuff that Jeff Bezos talked about. There was a lot of different information that he gave to those journalists. So we have some images that they brought from this factory floor, and here they're working on a BE-3 engine nozzle, and oh my gosh, there was so much really cool stuff. One of the hints that Jeff Bezos dropped was that there would be a fourth test of the New Shepard suborbital rocket and capsule system soon, which, could be yesterday. Who knows? But there will be another test soon.
Sorry, not to laugh over you, but that was indeed hilarious.
That was good. That was a nice little
But he also said that there would be an opportunity to witness a New Shepard flight later this year at the company's test facility in Texas, which tells me that they're probably going to invite media and possibly even members of the public out to that launch instead of having their secretive launches like they normally have done and then release it out later on. Something else is that the New Shepard will be flying scientific payloads later on this year, which is a cool opportunity, which a lot of the other suborbital companies have already been trying to jump on. But not only that, they could be flying test subjects in 2017 and flying paying customers to do suborbital tourism in 2018. So, here they are, kind of promising 2 years. We might be able to do it in 2018 is what they're saying. But this is definitely a lot better than the constant we're 6 months away over the past 8 years that we've been getting from other companies. But in any case, there is also an in-flight abort test that they're going to try to do with the New Shepard capsule when it reaches maximum dynamic pressure during launch. So that's something that's really interesting to add another level of safety to be able to do an abort from those type of missions as well, which of course they would need to be able to do anyway. But some of the other first things is they're hoping to test a complete version of their BE-4 methane rocket engine, which is hopefully going to be used on United Launch Alliance's Atlas V rocket and possibly their Vulcan rocket in the future. They've tested lots of different components of the BE-4 engine. They've done something like over 170 tests, hot fire tests of different pre-burners and stuff like that, but a complete test they're hoping to do later on this year. And if everything works out, something that I found was interesting is Blue Origin is also planning on having their own orbital launcher that would have a first stage powered by the BE-4 engine and then an upper stage powered by the BE-3 engine, which would be really similar to their New Shepard rocket that they have now, probably minus the landing legs. And this is the first time that they've dropped a name for that. Jeff Bezos kept calling it Very Big Brother, and they're hoping to debut that in 2020. Weird name, but whatever. That's cool that they're having that. Also, Blue Origin is going to be doing a lot of hiring over the next couple of years. They're hiring right now, in fact, and they're looking to expand their workforce, which is currently around 600 employees, to possibly over 1,000. So work is definitely picking up there, and I'm very glad to see that Blue Origin is starting to be a little bit more public about their stuff. In fact, the next day after this, there was actually a press announcement about some of those tests that they wanted to start doing on the BE-4 engine. So that's the first time I've ever seen a press release from Blue Origin talking about their progress and their plans for their test program. So, and of course, this is all coming out with because of their contracts that they have with United Launch Alliance. But still, like, I'm very happy to see a lot more. What's the word I'm looking for? Not sure. Anyway, I'm just glad that they're being more public about their information. So very excited about that.
It is interesting that I mean, we've kind of whined and complained about that a lot on the show, and I'm excited for it too. But there's a line there, right? Because we've heard other space company when you're developing spacecraft, you don't know timelines. You can guess, but you don't know. You have no idea. And so then you try, and everyone wants to know when. That's the first question is when. When are you
flying?
When are you flying? When is Virgin Galactic going to fly, right? 6 months away. And then it becomes laughable, right? Because you never hit it. But then you got the Blue Origin strategy of just like, don't talk to anyone about anything, right? And when we're ready, we'll show you. And there is something to be said for that.
Yes.
I mean, that is pretty neat. At the same time, we want to cheer along with you. So, yeah, it would be neat if you're like, okay, we're ready to launch. Here's your live stream. You can watch us live. That would be really cool.
Yeah.
Dear Blue Origin. Also, dear Blue Origin employees, if anyone watches this show and you have any contact inside of Blue Origin, we have actually requested someone from Blue Origin to come on the show, and we were politely told we are not interested in anything of the sort at this time. So if you guys have any other contact where I can get around that particular firewall, I would love to bring someone on Blue Origin on the show and talk about the amazing work that you guys are doing. We think what you're doing is awesome and very cool, and we want to get the planet excited about Blue Origin, but we can't do that if we can't talk to you and we don't know when you're launching stuff and we don't know what's going on. So please, would love to bring someone on the show, talk about the awesome stuff that you guys are doing, and get the planet and all of humanity excited about going to the stars.
That's right.
Be it low Earth orbit, or, well, heck, even suborbital, low Earth orbit. I mean, if you can go up to a Bigelow station, how cool. Imagine being able to take a vacation on a Bigelow station.
That would be sweet.
Wouldn't that be awesome?
I'm doing that.
Okay, I would like to see that.
I want to do that.
There you go. There's my plea for Blue Origin. All right. Also, Mini Stoge volunteers.
Yes.
Mini Stoge will fit in the New Shepard capsule.
All right, Jared, insight. Give us some insight.
I'll give you some insight because we were a little bit worried because a few weeks ago we just had to announce that our launch window for NASA's InSight lander to Mars was not going to be met because there was a problem with its seismometer instrument. And there was a real big discussion as to whether should we allow this mission to continue, should we not, should we just cancel it, should we mothball it, should we use it for another mission? Well, NASA came back this week and they officially gave it the A-OK to wait 2 years for the next launch window. So, InSight has been saved.
I'm not dead yet.
Yeah, it's not yet dead. Its new launch window will open on May 5th, 2018. So we've got a little bit of time to wait. And of course, it'll launch from Vandenberg Air Force Base here in California, and this will be the first interplanetary West Coast launch ever. Now, the delay...
Why are they launching from Vandenberg? That seems like a weird thing to do.
Cool thing that I found out, it all has to do with the ideal trajectory to take to get yourself to Mars when you want to burn that engine.
Okay.
So for the initial launch, in order for them, for the 2016 and 2018 window, the angle that they would have to take, so the launch azimuth that they would have to go at out of Cape Canaveral would take them either directly over the East Coast, which is a no-no. You don't drop rocket parts on people, or directly over Cuba, which is also a no-no because you don't drop rocket parts on people. So they figured that the best...
we don't drop rocket parts on people.
Yeah, most of it. Yeah, the United States at least doesn't. So they actually figured out that the best launch azimuth to launch it from for either the 2016 or 2018 window would literally be almost near retrograde, like something like a 100-degree launch azimuth. And guess where you can do that out of?
Vandenberg?
Yeah, Vandenberg, because what's the next thing that you fly over after you leave the launch pad? Oh yeah, Antarctica. So, you know, that's a pretty good place to do it from. So they basically chose Vandenberg.
I really want to see that plotted out. I understand what you're saying, but I can't quite wrap my brain around it. I want to see
it's
it like
wild
on,
stuff.
I want to see it like on a plot.
This is why you need to play more Kerbal.
That's why I need to play
Kerbal
more
Space
Kerbal.
Program.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're expecting this delay to cost about $150 million, but that will still keep it under its cost cap because it was cost capped at $675 million, and it came in under budget at $525 million for this mission.
Why is it going to cost so much more? Just because of storage needs? And
Storage, it's very difficult because you've now built something that's going to go to Mars, and there are certain standards of cleanliness that you need to have for your vehicle.
We can fix
to
that.
go to
All
Mars.
we need to do are land humans on Mars, and I think that cleanliness standard can be wiped out. There's no need for that anymore because we're going to definitely contaminate Mars with all this stuff we got.
For now, we're trying to keep it as clean as possible, and that's really expensive to store something in as clean an environment as it's going to need. Now, the problem was caused due to an unresolved fault in the vacuum encapsulation of the seismometer instrument, which was actually being built by the French Space Agency, CNES. This seismometer is so sensitive it can measure movement down to half of a hydrogen atom, which, just to give you an idea, that's 2 × 10⁸ millimeters. That is ridiculous.
Do they have to make things really, 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 really cold then?
No.
So they can just measure it without any sort of anything. How are they?
I'm trying to figure out your question.
I'm just wondering how the heck they're doing it.
Oh, well, they're making extremely sensitive instruments on board. So they've got these really cool things called...
I don't understand your question. It's not a question. I just don't get it.
Yeah, it's a really cool instrument that they've designed that maybe I'll go into detail about in a space pod.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Good space pod.
Yeah, and it's an extremely sensitive instrument because they want to be able to pinpoint where Mars quakes would potentially happen, not by detecting the initial pass of the seismic wave, if you will, but by detecting the second, third, and fourth passes. Because if you measure the amount of time from the second, third, and fourth passes, you can then literally triangulate based on that time where the earthquake occurs at.
Marsquake.
Marsquake. Thank you, Ben. They can also detect...
It'd be weird to have an earthquake on Mars.
Yeah, it would be. They can also potentially detect meteorite impacts as well on the surface of Mars with that, which is a really cool thing that they've never been able to study on the surface of Mars. So
Pretty neat.
yeah, how neat is that?
How neat?
That's pretty neat.
All right, Space Mike, talk to us about SpaceX.
So we have a couple of SpaceX updates. The first thing is that the autonomous spaceport drone ship has returned into port, and we actually have some pictures that were supplied to us by a member of our community. He's in the chat room right now as Craig VG, and thank you very much for supplying these pictures. Yeah, thank you very much. See, there's some pictures of the autonomous spaceport drone ship. This is, of course, I Still Love You, which is returned into port. And as you can see in the picture there, most of the wreckage from the failed landing attempt from the SES-9 launch has been cleared away, but you can still see some debris there and some scorch marks. But the witnesses claimed that they saw more wreckage on the ship than these photos show when it was first pulled into port. Very cool that is turned in. And something else that's cool about this is once it's ready for another launch attempt, the drone ship may be used again as a landing platform as soon as SpaceX's launch of CRS-8, which could take place this month, maybe April. I haven't really gotten an official launch date for that yet. But a more likely candidate for the next time that this particular drone ship will be used is in April, when SpaceX is going to be launching 2 communication satellites, the Eutelsat 117 West B and ABS-2A in April. And that's going to be a geostationary launch. So since the SES-9 was a geostationary launch, and this future launch of these 2 communication satellites follow that probably will be the next attempt that they will use, because I'm hoping that for CRS-8 they'll have enough fuel on board the Falcon 9 stage to land back at Cape Canaveral. But in some other news, Gwen Shotwell has recently said that they are targeting somewhere in November of this year to launch the Falcon Heavy. And there's a recent picture that SpaceX has uploaded of some work being done on their factory floor, and it looks like some parts for the Falcon Heavy. You can see that kind of black interstage kind of in the middle there, which is similar to a lot of the photos that they've shown of Falcon Heavy. And of course, that black and white nose cone there, I mean, what else would that be for than the Falcon Heavy boosters? So this is very cool, and there's already hardware going for that, and hopefully everything is going to go well for the rest of this year with SpaceX's launch manifest, so that they can keep up with that and be able to launch the Falcon Heavy this year. And the reason why they haven't, why it keeps getting delayed to launch the Falcon Heavy is because their launch manifest is so backed up. So if they can catch up and get things progressing along, then they'll be able to do that sooner rather than later. And it might get pushed into next year if there's any other delays with the launch manifest for this year. But in any case, very cool updates from SpaceX, and looking forward to the future launches. Hopefully this month, and if not this month, then definitely next month in April. So very cool.
Great, thank you, Space Mike. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to ask you guys, how can we make space exploration politically relevant? So stay tuned. We'll be right back, and I promise it'll be interesting. And welcome back to Tomorrow. Now, before we get started with our main topic this week, 2 things. First, daylight saving time for many people across the planet will kick in tomorrow, specifically the people in the United States. So a large swath of the United States, not you, Space Mike.
Nope,
you don't honor daylight saving time.
Nope.
Yep, which is part of the reason why when you take a look at the whole global populace, it's less than half of the global populace takes advantage of daylight saving time. And so to keep the show simple, we do not change our time. Our time is always 2100 Coordinated Universal Time, which means if you change your clocks this Sunday, the time of this show will become 1 hour later for you. So if it's 1 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, it becomes 2 o'clock Pacific Daylight Time, for example. So keep that in mind. Change your clocks, shows 1 hour later. There's your public service announcement. Also, I'd like to thank all of the patrons of Tomorrow for helping make this specific segment of this episode happen. These are the people who have contributed $5 or more to this specific episode. If you'd like to find out how you can crowdfund the shows of Tomorrow, head over to patreon.com/TMRO. Thank you very much. All right, so let's get into our main we're running late. Let's get into our main topic this week, which is how do we make space specifically space exploration politically relevant. And this topic came around because we're all in the Slack Citizens Room.
Yeah.
And by the way, all the premier citizens of Tomorrow have access to that Slack room. So if you don't have access for whatever reason and you're a premier citizen, email me, benjamin@tmro.tv. We'll make sure you get access. So we're in the room. We're trying to figure out the topic for the show. And I think it was Space Mike who said, why don't we talk about the different candidates and their policies on space. And we were going down that road, and then we realized it's kind of all wishy-washy.
They haven't really said anything yet.
Yeah, and most people hadn't actually said much, and we're like, all right, we'll wait till we have 2 candidates for that. But still on that kind of space politics, Gary, we kind of realized, why haven't they said anything about space? Why don't people care about space in politics, right? And that's a problem, I think. If we want to become a spacefaring civilization, this has to be something that people think about and people care about. Maybe they disagree with us, but they at least it needs to be a topic at least that is brought up more so than a NASA takes half of our budget kind of mentality, which obviously isn't true. So then that poses the question: how do we make space exploration politically relevant? And so there you go. I'll start with. I'll start with Jared and give you a chance to start us off with how you think we can throw you into the fire.
Sure, we can.
Because Space Mike was wishy-washy on this topic, so I'm like, I'm not going to throw him under the bus.
Before you begin, Jared, let me just say one thing real quick. That space is a very sensitive topic when it comes to politicians, because we've seen some politicians fail miserably when they bring up space. For example, Newt Gingrich with his whole moon plan, he was ridiculed, and that killed his political campaign. And then on the other hand, you have someone like George H.W. Bush with like National Space Plane and stuff he was saying that helped his campaign. So on that note, how can politicians be sensitive about it and make it relevant and not have it be something that they would be afraid of?
I've always thought of space as definitely helpful as an economic driver. It definitely helps develop the technology, the research and development, especially with NASA, because everything NASA does immediately goes public domain once they're done with it. And that's particularly helpful when you're trying to develop cutting-edge technologies and you really don't have somewhere to start. So that's always been my sort of political pitch to people, which is that spaceflight isn't just taking money and throwing it out into space. It's something that we're actually spending money here on Earth for, and you're putting it back in, and then you're making it available to all of these companies that may potentially want to be able to use that technology for whatever basis they'd like to, and that could generate could help generate a better economic stand, if you will, with everything that we have.
But we've got so many problems here, right? We've got infrastructure that's crumbling. We've got roads and bridges that are falling down. We've got a healthcare system that we're very polarized on. We've got so many issues here on Earth. Why should we look up to the stars? Why don't we fix those issues here on Earth first?
Well, one of the things that we've also talked about is that we do use spacecraft and space-based instruments to make decisions about things like that. Like you can use spacecraft and things to help look at certain geological aspects that may help you build infrastructure better and other things like that. So it's not necessarily that you're just kind of, like I said, launching the money into space. You're using it on a system that is then used to help make those kinds of decisions here on Earth at the same time.
So Lur in the chat room says, use the war motive, convince Congress that China is building a giant space laser on the moon. So, although it'd take a few seconds to hit us, I suppose. It would take 3 seconds for that to work. Is that actually an area? I mean, war has historically been a very good motivator. Is that an area that we want to go down, though?
I would rather not.
I mean, that's how. Isn't that how we ended up with flags and footprints on the moon?
Yeah, that was the motivation for the space race in the 60s.
And that was neat, and that got us Apollo. But again, it was only flags and footprints, and then we pulled way back. Shuttle kind of hurt us in that regard, right? Because we got stuck in the low Earth orbit. So that was kind of a reaction to, pushing all of that money and spending all that time in space. It was a political reaction. So, Space Mike, your thoughts? How do we make space exploration politically relevant?
Well, kind of along the same lines that Jared was saying with the whole economics of it, there have been so many things that have benefited our daily lives and have solved a lot of problems here on Earth. And some of it might not be as immediately seen as others. But something that I like to say to a lot of my regular friends who don't care about space, when they ask, why should I care or why should we keep doing it? I'm just like, well, this probably the single most biggest benefit that we have is the internet. I mean, if not for space flight and being able to have communication satellites, we've shrunk the world. We can now communicate with anyone at any time across the entire Earth. And that is amazing. And we've been able to solve a lot of problems because of that. And there have been lots of other benefits. And I don't think we have the time to go through, each and every single one right now. But there have been so many different things that have been able to help. And, for one example, I mean, on natural disasters, we can have early warnings for stuff now. Just being able to have, what limited data we do have about the weather, is enough to be able to help a lot of things. And we notice all these different patterns patterns, and engineers are able to take that data information and change the way that they design buildings and just how architecture is done. And there's been a lot of kind of indirect benefits from space flight. And those benefits are just going to keep coming because of space flight. Different innovations have been invented that are later applied to so many different terrestrial benefits here on Earth. And there's just a lot of different ways. And I think that the way that we make this politically relevant is to keep bringing that up. And if a politician, keeps bringing that up and shows these different benefits and kind of is able to look at the different existing programs and even whatever their future pitches might be for future programs of how that would be able to benefit things and how, whether it be scientific data or weather data or whatever it might be, how that would be able to benefit things and what the risk would and what all of the benefits of all that be. I'm sorry, I keep repeating myself, but
well, and let me correct one thing. The internet is not a space thing. The internet didn't come out of space, right? Now, space satellites help the internet, but there are also fiber optics that go under the ocean as well. So if we knocked all the satellites out of space, the internet would still function. So, to be clear, because we don't want to say this, space exploration did something that it didn't. It really didn't do anything. That's a DARPANET project.
Yeah.
Right? It was DARPA, and then there was like this ARPANET, and it was this whole thing to the side of space. But it does help communication. We certainly use it for satellite broadcasting, for phones. We do use it for internet, and now we're going to try to use it to get less sucky internet. In the not too distant future. So it'll play a great role there. But I feel like a lot of us are right now, we're preaching to the choir, right? Everyone watching gets this. We all agree with all of this. So then how do we convince people outside of the aerospace industry who are working, insane crazy hours? They're just, how do we convince them, we should spend money on these things?
I'm just going to say one of the big problems of making space politically relevant is that it's not accessible to a mass of people yet. It's been a very exclusive thing, and probably for the next 5 to maybe 10 years, there's still going to be exclusivity to it, where it's going to be either governments, very well-funded private groups, or really rich people that are going to be able to do it. And I feel like in the next 20 to 30 years, space will become politically relevant, because then we'll be doing things like asteroid mining and resource work and other things like that. But it's really difficult when only a very small set of the population actually has the skills or gets deemed worthy of having the skills with the ability to do that. It's really going to take a huge influx of just average people being able to actually do this.
Is that happening with Blue Origin, SpaceX, Virgin Galactic, Masten Space Systems, Xcore Aerospace? We're seeing these companies, and they're getting bigger and bigger and bigger, right? SpaceX is growing. Blue Origin.
Yeah.
I just said it. Blue Origin is growing at a really rapid rate. Do you think that's going to help because now people are vested in these things? I mean,
Absolutely,
obviously it'll help, but I mean, will it help enough?
I see a trend amongst people who aren't necessarily as in deep as we are. That SpaceX and Blue Origin and a lot of these other companies are the cool space, whereas NASA is still the boring space, I guess. And it's becoming cool, and people are, maybe not as I don't know, maybe not as, I don't know. I don't even want to criticize there, but they're knowing about this stuff, and all of people that I didn't even know were interested in space whatsoever be just like, oh, did you hear about the SpaceX launch? And I'm just like, of course. But yeah, I've seen a lot more conversations like that opening up, and I think that those companies are definitely helping to get the general public excited about space again.
Let's put Carrie Ann on the spot and send it over to Capcom. She just gave me a look. Send it over to Capcom, see if there's anything interesting happening in the chat room that we can kind of bounce back to. What are they saying about space?
Yes.
Thank you, Capcom.
Yeah, great. Copenhagen suborbitals as well. Talking about SpaceX and Blue Origin and Copenhagen, making space more accessible to more people. There's some interesting conversations going on about how we as humans have kind of cocooned ourselves in these cities, and there's a lot of light pollution, and so we're missing our natural connection to space. which I thought was kind of interesting.
Oh, that's an interesting idea.
Yeah. So there's a continuing conversation going on there. Amur Tiger, I believe, says I think the main advocacy for space should be science for science sake, which is, I like that idea. It's a hard sell though. Doing anything just for the sake of itself is sort of a hard way to position just about anything, I think.
Especially politically.
Oh, yeah.
Especially politically. Ironically, though, I think sometimes there's politics just for the sake of politics, but I'll digress there. That's a personal opinion. Ixnay is wondering why we aren't talking about harvesting helium-3 on the moon. So I thought that
Can
was...
we? Actually, that's a good question.
Sure.
But let's just say we harvested a boatload of helium-3 on the moon. Do we have a capability to fully utilize it here on Earth yet?
I don't think so, because if I remember correctly, helium. What is helium-3 used for, actually?
I thought it was for like you could turn it into an incredible energy source.
Yeah, you could, I guess, but I haven't heard much research or at least any progress.
I don't know that we're educated enough to comment on
I'm
that fully.
definitely
so,
not there,
I will ask the citizens of tomorrow the legit question: if we went to the moon and harvested helium-3, all like the movie Moon.
Oh,
with
for fusion.
For fusion, but
Which is just 10 years out for 50 years.
yeah, exactly. So. Yeah, that's not a real thing other than our sun.
For the moment. We can do it for a little bit. They're just called hydrogen bombs. So.
Well,
so.
I meant to control. Not what I meant, Jared.
Yeah,
Just saying.
goes back to the poor pitch.
I guess unless you guys have any final comments or if there's anything in the chat room, I think I'd like to turn it back over to you, the citizens of tomorrow. Leave your comments. What do you think, as a mere mortal, right? We've got the show tomorrow. That's our way to get people excited about space, and hopefully it's helping you get excited or rekindled your love of space exploration. That's our goal. But there are other things people can do. Go ahead, Mike. I see you.
Oh, I'm sorry. No. Finish your thought, and then I wanted to say my final comment on this.
Well, I was going to say there are other things that people can do, and what are those things? Do they write their congressman, congressperson? Do they? What do they do? How do they get people excited? Maybe you start a rocketry club. How do we make this relevant for people? Because I think that's the thing: is you need to make it relevant and important to people in general before they'll care, and they'll start bringing it up more and more and more again. So how do we do that? As the citizens of tomorrow, leave your comments. Go ahead, Space Mike.
I think that something that might help with this and make everything politically relevant and make everything work well is James Webb, the man, had the brilliant plan of spreading out a lot of the NASA facilities, especially in the United States South. And not only did that create a ton of jobs, but that has led to our current situation where we have senators and Congress people from the states where different NASA hardware is manufactured or the different spaceflight facilities that push and fight for their particular state's thing. So maybe what we need to do is we need to spread out everything space-related over all of the states so that every year all of the different senators and Congress people have to fight, to get their program to be the best. And even though that's something that we complain about a lot, of all the different jobs programs and how certain things might be held back and whatnot, I think that would make it politically relevant for everyone, because all of the different politicians would have to be involved at some point if they want to represent their constituents. So
I'm torn on that idea. I don't know, because right? Because then you would have space become relevant, but I don't want politicians dictating how to the engineers how to build a rocket. I'm not okay with that.
Don't tell me.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're a lawyer. You don't know how to build rockets.
You're right. So I agree, but I really disagree at the same time. I feel a little dirty, Mike. It's not good. So, ew. Leave your comments on YouTube, Twitter, wherever you'd like. And speaking of comments, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk about some of the viewer comments from last week's show. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
We've always looked to the stars. They guide us, give us comfort, help us find our way. We see ourselves out there. When we look up, it inspires us. long for something we don't yet know. We yearn to go there. So, we venture forth.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other thing, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
The exploration of space will go ahead, whether we join in it or not.
Many think we stopped exploring. But we know our journey didn't end. We've only just begun.
Orion is functioning perfectly at this point.
Come with us and explore tomorrow.
And welcome back to Tomorrow. Now, before we get into our patrons and everything else, we'll remind you one more time, if you change your clocks, the time of the show will be changing. It'll be going 1 hour later for you if you change your clocks. If you do not change your clocks, there is no change to the show time for you. It is that simple. All right. I'd like to thank all of the patrons of Tomorrow who have helped make this specific segment of this episode happen. These are the patrons who have contributed $2.50 or more. Also, I'd like to point out that we finally figured out how to get Unicode characters to render on the screen correctly. So if you have special characters in your name on Patreon, or if you removed them because they were all jumbled up before, you can put them back now. I think we fixed it finally. Yeah, there you go. Plus, we've got our patrons themselves. So the Patreon Plus, $2.50 or more, they'll get access to After Dark immediately, as well as the Google Hangouts. But for as little as 1 penny, those are our patrons on the screen right there. 1 penny gets your name in the show and a huge shout out and thank you from us here for helping support the shows of tomorrow. So for 1 penny to $2.49 right there. Head on over to patreon.com/TMRO. Every single penny does help. All right, Capcom, this is your segment. Take it away.
Yay. So.
You sound so excited.
Yeah.
What was our topic last week?
Our topic last week was Path to Mars. What was our Path to Mars? Hashtag Path to Mars. So.
Hashtag Path to Mars.
Hashtag Path to Mars. There you go. So first comment comes from, actually from tomorrow.tv or TMR.tv from Jason Damish. We'll say it's Jason Damish. Awesome. Says, problem. There's not an abundance of spaceflight. Until there's abundance of spaceflight, people will fight over where to go and what to do up there.
Which I think actually, in a weird way, loops back around to our main topic today, which also loops to a comment that was made right at the end of that last segment from Chris Radcliffe, which says, we've been having this discussion for decades now, and it feels circular. How do you get a huge number of people excited about space? So they'll fund some random space hardware that doesn't go to space, so you can debate about how to get the next round of funding. So, which is a valid point. I think the best way to get things doing in space is to not talk about it, but to do it, right? If you want things to happen in space, go make things happen in space. Build the things, fly the things. And if you can't figure it, be scrappy, be creative on how you build and fly them. Absolutely. And the more we fly, the more we'll be able to do. So I agree with Jason. If we can get more flights, if we can get more things going up, it will do a couple things. First, it'll people start to notice more because things are happening. But second, you'll be able to do more things in space because things are happening. So, and we're starting to see that now, right? We're seeing that with SpaceX, Blue Origin, all the names that I mentioned before. So it is actually a very exciting time to be a space nerd.
Quite exciting.
Yes, I don't want to say we're on the ground floor because that's not true, but we're
moving into the second golden age of space flight.
Second golden age of space flight. All right, next up.
The next one also comes off of TMRO.tv from Robert Beers. The main issue is lack of funds. I believe we would already have a permanent base on the moon and very likely a footprint on Mars by now if the necessary monies had been available. A lack of public support since the Apollo 17 moon landing has and will continue to be the #1 problem with space exploration. We must somehow get the people excited again, in my humble opinion. Awesome.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Alexa.
Alexa.
That's fantastic. Maybe, but let's not forget that in the Apollo era, it was about the same approval rating. Actually, I think it was a little bit worse for space flight in the Apollo era. Like, American citizens didn't really want us to do it, and they didn't. I think we take this with a grain of salt. I don't know if this number is correct, but like during Apollo, it was 49% in approval, and now, like right now, it's like 51% approval. So we've jumped 2 percentage points, but at least we're more than 50%. So I'm not sure that has really changed. It was all just politics, right? It was we were trying to win a Cold War, and so we needed to outmaneuver them in finances and in technology. And what better way to do that than with the moon? And that's what we did. So. Yeah, I'm not sure we want to go through that again, right? That was a pretty scary era.
Yeah, that was a less than ideal era.
So, I mean, maybe yes, no, but I think like the previous comment, we build it, we fly it, we make it go. We get, you get kind of interested, you rekindle your interest in space, and although Space Mike, you never lost your interest in space, right? I mean, you were a space nerd from little itty bitty, and now you just kept going.
Yeah, my primary interests shifted, but I've always been interested in space.
Girls shifted to anyhow.
Yeah.
the delay.
I actually
makes
went
it
to
an
school to
awkward-
be a comic book artist for a while, so there's just an example of where it shifted.
You should be a comic book artist about something space related. There you go. All right, next up, Capcom.
This one comes off of YouTube from Alpha HR or Alpha.
Halfar.
Guessing. I'm not very versed on orbital mechanics, but isn't the fall back to the inner solar system, i.e. the trip back from Mars, more energy efficient?
Jared.
Somewhat. It is a little bit more energy efficient, but you still have to have a really big rocket to get off of Mars and then get out of Mars orbit and back to Earth. And in addition to that, depending upon the power of your rocket, you have to wait for a certain time for you to be able to do that. So
It's about gravity tugging your vehicle back down, right? It's basically gravity tugging your vehicle back down.
Yeah, you'll have a little bit of influence from from going deeper into the sun's gravitational field, but really you have to have a big rocket even at Mars in order to get you back. That's just the way it is. Sorry, it's physics. So
sorry.
Yeah.
Hashtag sorry, it's physics.
Sorry, it's physics. So yeah, not as big as one from Earth to Mars, but it's still a very sizable vehicle.
But again, that's because our gravity well is larger here. So in order to escape our own gravity well, you need more energy to escape said gravity well.
Exactly.
All right, next up, Capcom.
This one comes off of YouTube from Merrick Pilney. Guys, you're making a great show. I hope you'll not end it anytime soon. It's geeky, but I'm a geek myself, so I can understand that. But the important thing is that it's very visible and you enjoy doing this and your show. It's like having a chat with friends that are into gaming, but space exploration is much more complex and interesting.
Although I will say that Kerbal Space Programming is Kerbal Space Program is a fun and awesome game that is both a game and a chat thing and geeky and fun. And there are some awesome channels on Twitch and YouTube if you want to be a space and gamer geek, and I totally recommend them. Actually, Scott Manley, who was on episode 801, I think it was. I'm surprised I remembered that. Episode 801, if you want to see Scott Manley talk about Kerbal Space Program and how it's relevant to you and be a gaming geek. But thank you. That is what we try to do. We try to have a conversation with you, and we're working very hard to make sure that it's a two-way thing. And actually, speaking of that conversation, Lur in the chat room asks, Space Mike, can you draw something for the next show?
Sure. What would you like me to draw?
Well, here's the thing. We didn't have time in this show. But To Wicked and a few others have been making. In last week's show, we talked about the
make the moon great again.
Or make Mars great again, or whatever it is. The political campaigns for the different things. Although I think I want to tweak it and change it a little bit. Should I talk about that now or later, or not at all in this show?
Yeah,
let's wait till
All right. After dark. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Let's finish this segment.
All right. So, but I think that something along those lines of the let's make Europa great again, or the moon, or whatever. Also, there was one episode where I kept saying Europa instead of moon of Mars. No, I said. Did I say Enceladus?
Phobos or Deimos?
Phobos. Yeah, I said Europa or Enceladus, and I meant to say Phobos. I don't remember what I said or what I meant to say, but I did something like that, and you just glossed right over it, and the rest of the internet was like, does Ben think that a moon of, Jupiter is the moon of Mars? And it's like, no, okay. Anyhow.
Anyways.
Thanks, commenters. I'm going to get in trouble for doing that.
Again.
Again. I'm going to get in trouble. Again.
Stop.
I'm joking and having fun. All right.
Sorry, Internet.
Moving on,
Sorry,
Capcom.
Capcom, give
Quick,
me out.
Capcom! Hold.
Save us.
Save me from myself, Carrie Ann.
Nope. It's what our viewers prefer to see is my reactions to you. This one also comes off of YouTube. This was from Barry Hayworth. Ben keeps saying Pluto is planet 9. He is wrong.
Yeah.
The same insight which
Let's make Pluto great again.
The same insight which recognizes that a dwarf planet, like a dwarf anything, is still a planet also applies to dwarf planet Sirius.
Yep.
Although it got reclassified later so that Pluto was regarded as the 9th planet when it was discovered, the updated classification now has Pluto as the 10th planet both in order of discovery and distance from the sun.
But not quite, because the reclassification doesn't classify Pluto as a planet incorrectly, mind you. Which means that Pluto and Ceres are not planets under the new classification.
No, they're minor planets.
Right, so...
They're not major planets.
You know,
So-
I don't
Plutoids?
understand why you insult Pluto that way. Pluto's a planet, too.
Look, when we started looking at stars, we all thought stars were going to be the same, except they were all different color. And then we started to realize that some of them are really big, some of them are really small, some of them are at the end of their lives, at the beginning of their lives, in the middle of their lives, and we had to classify them. So we have things like red dwarfs, white dwarfs, main sequence, supergiants, hypergiants, and other things like that.
But they're
And
all still stars.
they're all still stars.
We don't insult one of them calling it a minor star.
No,
or
we
a dwarf
don't.
star. Actually, we do.
Actually, we do. I was about to say, yeah, dwarf is pretty well used in astronomy, in the science. So, yeah, you know, I don't know what to tell you, Ben, other than that.
Look, I'm just saying that we need to make Pluto great again.
I know.
You know what? Pluto, we can be winning. We can win with Pluto. Pluto 2016. All right, moving on.
Also from YouTube, this comes from Jeff300. So are there any plans or concepts for this moon base yet? I feel like building a moon base, especially an underground one to avoid radiation, will be an essential part of figuring out Mars colonization.
I know a few people are working on moon bases, but I don't know anything that's actually real yet. Be cool if someone made that rule. All right, citizens tomorrow, make me a moon base.
Moon base.
Make it happen.
Yeah.
Moon base. Make it happen. All right, figure it out.
Crowdfund it.
Crowdfund
If
it.
you need to.
No, I mean, figure.
Yeah.
I no longer believe anything's impossible, and I think that if you could get enough momentum behind it, it might be possible to actually crowdfund something like that. It would be
potentially.
exceedingly difficult. Don't get me wrong. I don't actually see a clear path forward on that, but I wouldn't discount it as impossible. All right, next up.
So there was a little bit of confusion over what would constitute being Space Vidcast, now known as Tomorrow, first episode, and where we would actually celebrate the anniversary thereof.
Because what we did is we started broadcasting. We need to fix this.
Yep.
We started
A little bit. It's okay.
And then I turned to you, which
Yeah,
is like
'cause,
this
like,
weird.
that
Now it
makes
looks like
any
I'm
sense.
talking. So
Just
Mike.
Speak to the camera, would you?
So
All right, thank
what
you.
happened was Space Vidcast, which is now Tomorrow, started broadcasting with a shuttle flight, and I thought it was STS-119, but BZ Wing Zero on Twitter aptly reminded me, no, it was STS. Actually, he didn't tell me which one it was, but we figured out it was STS-123
Yes.
by going back and watching the first episode. So we started broadcasting with the shuttle launch, and then we actually started our first episode right after it landed, right? So when was our birthday, essentially? Was it the moment we first started broadcasting, or was it the moment when we first had our first show? We asked on Twitter, and I voted it was our first show, but we weren't allowed to tell you which one of us thought which.
Yeah.
Right? So that was the rule.
We
Carrie and I
debated that
had.
in the car real quick. I was like, no, everyone's going to agree with you. Screw
No,
that. You're not allowed to say
No,
anything.
everyone would agree with you just to spite me.
No,
But,
no.
oh, come on. They
no.
totally would.
I
yeah.
agree with Carrie Ann.
Yeah,
Thank
exactly,
you.
just to spite me, exactly. So, but you guys, you did make, it was overwhelmingly clear that the birthday of Tomorrow / Space Vidcast is on our very first moment of broadcasting,
Yes.
which makes it March 11th.
Yes. So happy anniversary,
So
Internet.
happy anniversary.
it.
Yay!
We did it. We made Pluto great again.
Happy anniversary, Mom and Dad.
Aw.
Happy anniversary, guys.
That is our show. I'd like to thank everyone so much for watching. After Dark is up next. If you're a Patreon Plus subscriber or above, you will get access to After Dark as soon as we post it online. For everyone else, It'll be available in about 4 weeks or so. We're back on track now. So thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next week. Oh, but without a Jared.
Yep.
Oh.